Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of our podcast series. My name is Margot. I am a marketing manager at Hyperlex, a startup, a startup which provides companies with a contract management solution that helps to structure, simplify, and accelerate contract processes. And today, I'm happy to interview Richard Tromans, an expert in legal innovation. Hello, Richard. Thanks for accepting this interview. How are you today?
Oh, oh, hello, and thank you very much for having me on the show. I'm very good.
Great. Richard, you're a jack of all trades. On the one hand, you're a consultant. You provide legal tech companies from startups to large scale businesses with strategic advice and management consulting inputs. But you're also the founder of The Changing Legal, a think tank that focuses on providing pathways out of the time based legal economy, promoting shared standard and legal data sharing, and rethinking the means of legal production. You give speeches, run workshops, and share events all around the world. And last but not least, you have created The Artificial Lawyer, which is a news site dedicated, dedicated to changing the business of law for the benefit of society as a whole, with a strong emphasis on the use of technology. We're so lucky to have you here today to talk about legal innovation. So thank you so much for being here. I guess my first question
Well,
is
thank you for inviting me.
I guess my first question is what, in your opinion, has caused the recent boom in legal technology?
Okay, how long have we got? uh,
As long
the short okay, the short answer is that well, I think there's two. The two key factors is one is a very simple factor that we often overlook, and that is simply that it's possible. Um, 20 years ago, we didn't have SaaS solutions. You didn't have cloud technology, or at least not as we have it today. Um, the data processing speeds are much faster. The quantity of data that can be moved is much greater, and you can do it very cheaply, almost for free. Um, the law is a very text heavy business. It's basically about crunching text, whether it's litigation or it's a transaction. It's just tons and tons of documents. There's a load of negotiation and representation and advice and so forth around those documents, but the actual stuff, the things that can actually be uh, connected to technology, it's basically text. Problem with text is that one, it's what we call unstructured data. So it's not like numbers. It's words, and words are until very recently have been very hard to digitize in a meaningful way. You can digitize a document, but can the computer read it? Can the computer do anything with that information? So what we've seen also is the development of things like natural language processing, which is the technology which forms the basis of what we call a lot of legal AI technology. So it's technology that can actually read text in a more not like a human really. It's probably an exaggeration to say that, but it's way more meaningful. It can look at an entire clause and then compare it to another clause in a contract. So it can perform a little bit of how a lawyer might work, a human lawyer would work. Then you have, as I said, you've got the all the stuff around data, digitization, SaaS. So everything has just become a lot easier, cheaper, more agile. And we also now have the actual technology to actually do these things. 20, 30 years ago, you couldn't, even if people had wanted to, the cost of running, the cost of developing and running an NLP system that could read 10,000 documents would have been absolutely astronomical. It's the kind of thing that only NASA, you know, or the
Mm.
CIA or whoever would have been able to afford. Now anybody can do it. I or you could literally right now go onto GitHub, download some free natural language processing software, open up an account for a cloud service provider, ring up a few law firms and say, "Hey, can I analyze your documents?" And obviously, with a bit of training, and obviously it's not that simple, but still, the actual setup costs are almost negligible. You know, a kid at school could technically, in theory, set up a pretty effective legal tech company,
Mm,
which is incredible. And like I say, 20 years ago, you couldn't do that. So that's part one. Part two is demand. The legal world has, until very recently, generally escaped the rules. Well, you might say the rules of physics. It's defied gravity. Um, Most parts of the economy have to generally increase efficiency as time goes by. So if you look at travel, if you look at retail, look how retail has changed. Or the food industry, restaurants, efficiency, efficiency, efficiency. It's only really in the absolute top end of the luxury haute couture kind of world where you're buying like a dress for like $100,000 or something, where sort of efficiency is actually even almost like not wanted. And there are some parts of the legal world that are still like that. But the truth is that large corporates, let's take, I don't know, EDF in France, right? Or Renault or whoever, these are huge companies with literally millions, maybe hundreds of millions of contracts. Their day-to-day compliance needs probably need a team of about 100 lawyers working all day, every single day, just to stay on top of just day-to-day stuff. So we're not talking, end of the world, the European Commission takes EDF to court for something and the whole company is freaking out and they need the best lawyers in Paris to come in and give them advice. We're
mm,
not talking about that. We're just talking about day-to-day stuff, managing contracts, handling compliance, handling regulatory issues, day-to-day contracting with through procurement with suppliers and clients and so forth. All of these things are just manual processes that can be made more efficient. And it's taken a long time, but generally, the owners of these businesses and the shareholders and the management teams are starting to say, and it's incredible to think it's it's 2021. I mean, it sounds like the day when I was growing up. 2021 was, the title of a like a science fiction story,
yeah.
you know. And we're only now in 2021 when you think that computers started to be used by business, you know, en masse in the 1980s, really, and certainly by the 90s, pretty much every large business was digitizing some aspect of their activity. That it's only really now that the law has really got into it.
Mm,
And I think one of the biggest problems really is when we're talking about, you know, this subject of legal tech and law, it's very, very, very distributed. You might walk into a law firm, in London, and blows your socks off. You're just like, wow, these people are just so digitized. Their clients understand what they're doing. It's just amazingly advanced, and it even surprises you. Even if you came out of another industry like financial services, you'd be like, wow, these people are really on the ball. You could cross the road to another law firm of equal status, equally respected, and it's kind of like they're still using paper and pencils.
so why do
And
you
equally,
think?
but
Sorry.
this is the key point, is
Yeah.
that not only that, but their clients don't care either. So it's a very, very, very strange market. You can literally go from like one side of the street to the other, and you can move from the 21st century to the 19th century, and then back again. It's very odd. It's very odd.
Yeah.
So, and there's a famous phrase that the future is already here. It's
Mm,
just not evenly distributed, and that's very much the case here.
it's very interesting. Um, so, as I mentioned, you're the founder and editor of The Artificial Lawyer, a news and views site dedicated to legal innovation. And I
Mm.
think everyone listening to us should check it out and read as many articles as possible. Why did you create this media?
Well, again, how much time do we have? But the short answer is that it was an accident. I didn't want to create it, uh, and it was not a plan at all. It started off by accident. I started a blog, as many people do. I'm a management consultant. I was a journalist. I stopped being a news journalist in about 2004, so a long time ago. And I started working as a management consultant in around 2007, 2008. I still technically am a management consultant. And like a lot of professionals, people have blogs. And they blog about
Mhm.
stuff, you know, like their puppies or, you know, doing origami or flower arranging or something. So I thought, what should I blog about? And I thought, I'll do a blog about technology because one, I know absolutely nothing about it, and two, it'll be fun, it'll be interesting. You know, so I just started, and I think probably because I used to be a journalist, it came out, you know, maybe a little bit more professionally than some other blogs where, 'cause, as you know, writing is a skill.
It
Um,
is.
and I think secondly, it took off because there were other people writing about what I was writing about, but they weren't looking at it how I looked at it.
Mhm.
I mean, I was looking at it. I mean, my job as a management consultant, I was also the head of research for quite a interesting group in London. We used to merge big law firms together. We merged giant law firms, like billion-dollar law firms together. And as you can imagine, one of the jobs you have to do is you have to try and predict the future. You have to, because people say, well, why should we do this deal? And so you have to do like a 2 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 year, 20 year sort of plan into the future to say, look, this is how the market is changing. Look at all these different dynamics. Look at these forces. Look what's happening on a regulatory side. Look what's happening in terms of the globalization of business. Look at what's happening with China, et cetera, et cetera. World Trade Organization. What's happening technologically as well. And you have to plan and think ahead, and then you also have to think about the business. So, what will be the benefits of having 5,500 lawyers? Are we going to get richer? Are we going to get poorer? Or if we're going to get poorer, there's no point doing it. So we need to do financial analysis here, right? So I came at it from a sort of macroeconomic kind of perspective, a business perspective. I was saying, well, okay, well, look, technology, yes, very nice. But who cares? Why is it important? How does it change things? How does it change things for the lawyer, for the client, for society as a whole? Because ultimately, this is the key point, really. And otherwise, I just would not have the motivation to do this, to keep doing it. Is that, we live in a rules based society. So you need lawyers, right? Um, but there's no reason why the provision of legal services has to be slow, inefficient, and unnecessarily expensive. So, if you're in a life or death situation, yeah, okay, throw the kitchen sink at it, pay a fortune for that advice because relatively it could save $1 billion company. So, $10 million for some advice from Bread and Pratt, for example, is worth it. However, if a large corporation is just managing its 10 million contracts and the cost of managing these contracts is so high that it starts to effectively lose money and increase its own liabilities and increase its own risks, well, that's a very silly situation to be in because technology can solve that problem. And when companies are inefficient and legal services fail to be efficient, it's a detriment to society. It slows things down, even for a very basic thing. Like, let's say, for example, you have a rich relation who dies and wants to give you some money in their will. That can take months, years to get processed. Not because people don't believe what's written in the will, but because all kinds of things have to be processed. So documents that say X person owns this asset, which is held in a bank, that has to be verified by the in-house legal team. Your lawyer has to then look at the documents. Notaries come along, all kinds of things. It's an incredibly laborious process. So even on a very basic human level that affects everybody, it's very, very, very slow. Look at buying and selling houses. again,
Mhm.
all that documentation. It could be everything should be digitized. It should move very quickly, and so on and so on. So just so from the high street, from the basic level of us individuals, all the way up to huge corporations, there's this enormous amount of activity that unfortunately is still mostly manual even today, and that needs to change.
Okay, very interesting. The intersection of law and technology has always been a curious topic of conversation within the world of law. And on The Artificial Lawyer, you write about subjects like AI doc review, that's what you were talking about, document automation, and contracting platforms and smart contracts. How are these innovations changing the way lawyers and experts are working? And also, in your opinion, what innovations are here to last?
Well, wow. Well, again, I think it goes back to the earlier point that some law firms have fully embraced or are trying to embrace as much of this technology as they can where it is useful to do so. Others just are not. So to say how far, how big an impact it's had, it's quite hard to say because, like I say, it's completely random. It's like a Jackson Pollock painting. I mean, there's no regularity to it. The only thing that you can say for sure is that in the UK, a market I know fairly well,
Mm,
the top 10 law firms have definitely heavily invested in tech and continue to, in fact, increase their investment really, and are using these tools like natural language processing for document analysis, for M&A, or contract automation to speed up the delivery of work to their clients. They are definitely doing this. The further down you go, the more random it gets. Um, and a part of this is because of the pressure of clients. You see, there's a kind of well, I suppose I should probably come up with a formula for it. But basically, the smaller you are, the less money you have to invest in tech. Right. Equally, the client matters. The money they're paying you becomes less and less. So the incremental benefits of investing in technology, the might only be 30, 40,000, 50,000 euros, dollars to buy, becomes less and less useful because you're thinking, well, let's say you're a high street firm and a piece of tech will cost you 50,000 euros. But the average assignment that you do for a client is 2 or 3 thousand euros. And this piece of technology will, let's say, save you 10% of your time, which can be then invested in generating new clients and operating more efficiently and do more work. So you get more throughput, you generate more revenue. The thing is, the smaller law firms just don't think like that. They're like corner shops. They just sit there with the door open, clients walk in,
mm,
they do the work, when they finish the work, when they finish the work, they hit them with the bill. Thank you very much, and on to the next one. As you get larger and larger and larger, they become real businesses. And they start to say, well, look, we've got 1,000 junior lawyers. We can bill these junior lawyers at X price. If we do low value work, this mass of junior lawyers are going to generate less profit for us. So we need to think about that. We need to think about how we can use technology to support the business. And this is what it's fundamentally about. You see, I think, again, a lot of people get off on the wrong track and are kind of surprised that lawyers aren't using technology very much. But it's because unless you can prove a business case, why should they? If you have a business that makes a ton of money, huge profit margins. I mean, law firms make gigantic profit margins relative to many other sectors, right? I mean, a retail business that sells food, for example, might make a profit margin of 1%, right? Top tier legal services businesses might be making 30, 40% profit margins. Right. So they're incredibly successful businesses. So when some bright young thing comes along and says, "Well, you're all rubbish and you should use technology," they're like, "Yeah, why?" You know,
Yeah.
it's just like, why should I? Why should I? So you want me to spend money on something that's going to be a pain to use? It's going to be a pain to implement. I don't really understand what it is. The clients are not asking me to do it, and on top of that, it might actually even just get in the way of us making money. This has always been legal tech's problem. Is that legal tech has not always, but some of it has approached the legal market as if the legal market kind of should, you know, almost kind of religiously just do what they say because it's
Mm.
obviously the right thing to do. But if you can't prove the business benefit, then it won't happen. So, to answer your question, the reason why it's very fragmented and a messy market in terms of adoption is because it's only where the tech has been found to actually increase profitability, to reduce risk, to add efficiency in a way that actually makes the company or the law firm more money, that it happens. And like I say, it's a weird one. It's a weird one. The really really big corporations will push back on process work, so like contract management. But equally, the really big corporations have got the most to lose. So if you're a $1 billion business and you might go under, you've got a lot of unhappy people. So throwing $10 million a law firm for a piece of advice that might include no technology whatsoever is a good deal. So you've got this very strange kind of split. At the bottom of the market, like I say, is that the small law firms are charging relatively small amounts of money, and the clients don't know any better. And they also don't have very many alternatives. And the investment of tech in tech is just seen as negligible. It's just like pointless. Like what good will it bring us? So I mean it's the truth. I mean the narrative that everybody wants is like one of these TED Talk American style success stories where you know Bob was a lawyer, he was slow and not very good, and then wonderful tech arrived and it changed his life, and now everybody is happy and much richer. I mean, it's just not true. It's just that's not how it works. The truth is that Bob is actually an incredibly successful lawyer. He makes tons of money. His clients don't care as much as we think about all these things. And the tech company is basically a pain because it costs money. They have to implement it. There could be security risks. And even if they do buy it and implement, will people even use it? And also, the clients, in many cases, know less about legal tech than the law firms do. So they don't even know what they want.
What do you
So
think could change that? Where
it's
what
going to be,
could we do?
it's going to take years. It's going to, and it has taken years. I mean, in 5 years, I've been doing artificial lawyer for 5 years, and things have changed. It's relative. It's a bit like global warming, but in this case, it's like we want global warming to actually happen. If you see what I mean, it's like it's going to be incremental. It's going to be really slow. Um, you know, you're starting to see effects in the environment, in the legal environment, you might say, but the big kind of cascade, apocalyptic change, that's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen anytime soon. Um, People kind of thought it was when these legal AI tools arrived because they so massively increased efficiency. But the truth is that most law firms don't want to use them unless it makes them money. And of course, why not? Because they're private businesses. If I tried to sell you a piece of technology that was a pain to use and didn't increase your profits, why would you take it?
Mm.
I wouldn't. I
I
wouldn't.
wouldn't either.
So this is it. So legal tech has always had an uphill battle, and for many years, legal tech it was essentially focused on areas where there was no argument. So let's have a practice management system that enables us to better manage our work. You can't argue with that, it's easy. Or let's have a depository to put all of our documents, document management system. Again, you can't argue with that. I mean, if you could say we don't need it, we can just flick through our old emails and try and find the right documents. And some law firms still do that. Some law firms don't even bother to do that. But you can see the clear benefits. E-discovery, again, if you've got 10 million documents to read as part of an e-discovery process, there's no way you can do that manually. You've got to use some kind of technology. Even the biggest law firms that have huge resources have conceded many, many years ago, 20 years ago, that e-discovery is absolutely necessary. And in fact, the courts, if you went into an American court now and tried to do a big piece of litigation without e-discovery, the judge would probably intervene and say, look, you've got to use technology. Otherwise, this case is going to last like 25 years. You've got to. So there have been some good areas of progress, but like I say, but where it gets really, really complicated is where the business case and the technology bump into each other,
Mm.
and it's not crystal clear.
Okay. So many challenges for legal tech companies
Well, I
to
mean,
come.
if anyone's watching this, or if anyone does watch this, or even if it's just your own company that watches this,
No.
the simple answer is this: build a really strong and genuine business case, and build that business case on talking to the people you're selling it to. Don't come to people with this idea that because it's technology and it's more efficient, that they should have it.
Okay, we will. Um, do you think legal tech softwares should be made coded by lawyers or legal experts?
Well, this actually I think was the most interesting question because it goes to the heart of a really classic problem in the law. Um, I mean, let me ask you a question in turn. Is Elon Musk an astronaut?
Not really.
No, he's never been to space.
But
He's
he
not an
loves
astronaut.
space, apparently.
Yeah, and yet he now owns and has developed through incredible effort the most successful space company outside of big governments, right?
Mm,
He's not an astronaut. He's not NASA qualified. He's never been in a spaceship, as far as I understand. Um, Now, if someone who basically has no experience of space, is not an astronaut, can build and run the most successful, you might say, tech company for space in the world, why should a lawyer have to run a legal tech company? And they don't have to. But the reason why lawyers end up in legal tech is a funny one. It's mainly because most people outside of the legal world don't understand what goes on in big commercial law firms. Because why would they? Law firms, unlike most businesses, really have a wall of secrecy around them. They do not try to publicize how they work, for obvious reasons, and equally because most people wouldn't be interested. If you met a guy or a girl on a bus and you started talking and they said, "Can I explain to you how we do an M&A transaction?" You'd be like, "No, it's okay. You don't have to. Honestly, you really don't have to tell me." And it's kind of like that. And the thing is that the general population who make up tech entrepreneurs and investors, and people who go to MIT and do a PhD in machine learning or whatever, don't generally have much connection with the legal world and don't want to.
mhm.
Understandably, they want to go off and work for Google or some really cool retail application that's going to go from 0 to 1 billion in about 6 weeks. You know, whereas legal tech companies take about 10 years to go from 0 to 10 million. You know, they're much more. They're like cacti. They really grow really slowly. It's because the legal world is really more of a desert. It's a desert environment for technology. There are some great little places, but generally it's a desert. Um, the retail world, the high street, is more like a rainforest. It's just gushing with activity. You know, so who is going to create these legal tech companies? Very often it's lawyers. It's lawyers who get bored of being a lawyer or frustrated with being a lawyer, and they say, "I don't want to do this job anymore," and so they leave, and then they're like, "Oh my god, what am I going to do?" Uh, they end up creating a legal tech company. But do lawyers have to own and run legal tech companies? Absolutely not. And I've seen this a few times in French kind of legal tech literature, and I think it's a huge problem. And the country and probably other countries in Europe really need to drop that idea because it's really dangerous and it could really kill innovation in the market. Because if you work on the assumption that the professionals whose sector it is have to own and run and control the technology that's going to help it, it's going to move very, very slowly, right? I
Well,
mean, well, take for example, let's go back to astronauts, right? Let's say, imagine if in America the government said you can only own a space company if you're a qualified astronaut. So there'd be no Jeff Bezos would be like, okay, bye bye, forget about that. Elon Musk, forget about that. Richard Branson, forget about that.
mm,
So there would be no private space companies in America. The same. So I think it's really, really important in France and other countries that you get the message out that yes, it's fantastic that lawyers want to give up their jobs and start tech companies. That's great. But the idea that only lawyers should be doing it is a really risky approach. You really have to make sure that people don't, you know, see the world that way. Because if you do, you're just going to get stuck.
okay. Um, well, here is my last question for you, Richard. What
Mm.
are the latest legal tech news that you've picked up and why?
There's so much happening. So much happening. Um, it's just a constant evolution, really. It's just, I think the most amazing thing, really, is actually how quickly some of the market learns. You know, the thing about big law firms is that they learn very quickly. Lawyers are very fast learners because they have to be, and also because they're generally very smart people. Um,
Of course.
you know, yeah, not always, but generally, the the the, the ability to see something new coming, predict what will happen to it, bring it into the firm, test it, experiment with it, develop a department and a process internally for handling it and creating value from it is extraordinarily fast for some firms. So, like, take Linklaters, for example. I mean, they've got like four or five different parts of the organization that deal with tech and innovation in different ways. There's people who are just focused on testing and experimenting. They've got their own group that builds their own tech and sells it. They've got an umbrella, you might say, department that thinks broadly about efficiency, technology, innovation, and how that feeds into client service. Then you've got the sort of day-to-day tech people who just sort of manage everything that's been brought in by the firm. And then you've also got lawyers who are still practicing lawyers, but their job is to think about tech innovation and to help with implementation projects. So, like, but then again, this is a multi-billion-dollar law firm, right? This is a law firm that's bigger than many companies, right? So they can do this. They can do this. They have the resources. Um, And I think actually, again, I think this is one of the challenges that France faces. I mean, you've got some very big law firms like Gide.
Mm.
Right? Gide is a huge law firm. It's got tons of resources. It could do the same thing if it wanted to. It could afford to do this. Some of the smaller boutique firms, it's not that the legal tech will cost them a lot of money. this is the thing, you see, is that legal tech in itself isn't that expensive. You know, a lot of these smaller startup tools, the license might be 30, 40, 50,000 euros, you know, which to a successful law firm is peanuts,
Mhm.
right? It's not the cost of the software that's the problem. It's having a team of innovation and technology people to implement the technology and to manage it. Because those people are not going to be fee earners, right? They're staff. They don't generate any profit for you.
Mhm.
Getting smaller to medium sized law firms to invest in those people, I think, is the real challenge. Um, so if you want, in terms of news, I mean, there's tons of stuff happening, but I think the real news is actually, I think, how far away, well, how far apart the law firms that are doing this correctly are moving away from all the others who are kind of sitting, you know, on their hands and not doing anything. And
Okay.
I think eventually it's going to make a difference.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your time, Richard. I hope you enjoyed this interview as much as I did, and I encourage everyone listening to us to go check out the Artificial Lawyer.
Thank you. Thank you. And yeah, well, you know, hopefully it's interesting. And if there are any French lawyers watching, you know, drop me a line.
They will.
All right. Thank you very much for having me on the show.